No American film icon inspires more odd reactions from film critics than Clint Eastwood, a legend who doesn't always make legendary films, especially lately, but always seems to warrant everybody's rapt attention and a huge benefit of the doubt. Almost like we're all afraid that any one of these will end up being the last one and nobody wants the last word they said about Clint Eastwood to be a negative fucking review. I think part of the fascination with Eastwood is that he's that rare masculine movie icon who fits two molds: a badass classical action hero and a complex, emotionally sensitive artist who puts out meaningful, well-crafted, occasionally excellent films as director. But while it's true that Clint drives the movie press to bend over backwards trying to love his work like only a surrogate father figure can, the fact is when he's on, he is really fucking on, and Sully, which arrives practically gift-wrapped for his unique directorial and narrative sensibilities, is not only a damn good little movie in its own right, but a welcome return to form for Eastwood after the depressing misfire that was American Sniper. You see, Clint has always been at his best as director when his subject allows him to zero in on the specifics of character and story that speaks to both his intellectual and artistic interests. When he hits on material like that, you get good stuff like $1 Million Baby, Unforgiven, Perfect World, Gran Torino, Letters from Iwo Jima, but when he tries to pack too much in or get too broad of a scope, you get admirable but malfunctioning misfires like Hereafter, J. Edgar, or Changeling. Ponderous, extraneous bullshit is just not Clint's strong suit as a filmmaker, so it's highly appropriate that Sully is a story that actively resists even the semblance of being extraneous. In fact, in many ways, it's a much more noteworthy film for what it avoids doing than anything it actually does. Now, in case you forgot, the story is back in 2009, a passenger plane got hit by some birds and lost both its engines over New York City, with disaster being averted by a miraculous dive into the Hudson River that ended up saving 155 lives on board, or everybody, basically. It was subsequently discovered that the daring save had been pulled off by the plane's pilot, Captain Chesley Sullenberger, a guy who basically looked like somebody sent a note to Central Casting for a hero airline pilot. Seriously, look at this fucking guy. In any case, Eastwood's movie is primarily concerned with the days after the so-called Miracle on the Hudson, where Tom Hanks as Sully and Aaron Eckhart as co-pilot Jeffrey Skiles are struggling to cope with the emotional push-pull of a media that's ready to anoint them as real-life superheroes, and a skeptical National Transportation and Safety Board, or NTSB, investigation whose computer models and simulations suggest that maybe a less high-risk solution to the incident was possible and that Sully may have acted rashly, with the film ultimately becoming a kind of man versus technology parable, pitting Sully's insistence that his decades of experience and second nature feel for the operations of an airplane led him to the correct decisions, while simulations and analysis offer competing scenarios. And it's a genuine testament to the actors and the filmmaking that the stakes of Sullenberger's reputation and sense of self-worth being potentially besmirched really do end up feeling almost as riveting as the more life or death stakes up on the airplane. The flashback-heavy plot structure means we get to see what happened to the plane itself multiple times from several different perspectives, including nightmare sequences depicting Sully's imagined view of how things might have worked out if he had in fact acted differently. And yet somehow none of this feels anywhere near as exploitative or overly melodramatic as it otherwise might. Hell, the fucking thing is almost over before anyone brings up the loud, obvious elephant in the room, i.e. the reason the Miracle on the Hudson seemed like such a cultural event was that an airline disaster being prevented over New York City felt like a long overdue catharsis for 9/11. Even in that respect, you can feel Eastwood's admirable restraint. Nobody has to say it out loud to understand that every POV reaction shot we see of everyone from ordinary people to rescue workers watching a plane fall out of the goddamn sky over the city was universally underscored by a visceral, unspoken sense of, oh God, not again. Like I said, it really is impressive how much the film avoids doing in terms of what you could typically expect from this kind of movie. It would be so fucking easy to try and blow the story up into something bigger and more maudlin, maybe by giving us Sully's life story, or personal baggage, or packing in B-stories about his or Skiles' personal lives, trying to visualize his sixth sense about the plane through some kind of elaborate visual effects representation. Hell, you could turn this thing into a fucking mini-series just by giving all the passengers full-blown backstories and character arcs, instead of the just enough humanizing vignettes that are used in the finished film. Instead, what we get is a very lean, matter-of-fact procedural that feels intensely personal, but also direct and uncluttered. Vintage Clint Eastwood shit. About 5 minutes in, the movie says, hey, we gotta figure out what happened to this plane. And then 90 minutes later, they figure out what happened to the plane, and it's fucking over. No extras, no fat, no bullshit. Now, on the other hand, that does mean that in some respects, it can only get just so close to being great. This is a movie about a guy just doing his job that appropriately just does its job. But unlike landing a plane, elevating a movie narrative often is about extra flourish and taking risks that the movie is just not interested in taking. It's an admirable, workmanlike film about an admirable, workmanlike man, and that it doesn't need to be more than that doesn't mean that it somehow becomes not more than that. It's also unfortunate that Eastwood just can't seem to resist making the NTSB investigators look a little bit like the villains of the piece, so that the final public hearing sequence can have a touch more edge to it. Yeah, I get it, it makes dramatic sense on paper, but to suddenly tip even for a moment over into the "how dare you eggheads second guess this great man's abilities" territory, when the whole rest of the movie is about insisting that all of this supposed heroism was really just people doing their goddamn jobs, it just rings a bit false and tonally at odds with the rest of the movie. It's easy to imagine why that element might have proved irresistible to Eastwood as a storyteller, but it's out of place and does a notable but non-fatal disservice to what's otherwise yet another great, destined to be underappreciated Tom Hanks performance. Seriously, Hanks has been on fire for like a decade and no one's been giving him the proper credit. He's even good in those fucking Da Vinci movies. But overall, damn good movie. 3 stars, check it out. Just, not before you have to fly, I guess.